Peace, everybody. Fahim, aka After Elemental.
Peace, this is Abdul Mubdi coming to you. Mubdi.
Dominic Smith, aka D Chorus.
And you're tuning into another episode of Through Our Lens. Today we are going to talk about economics and the silent war against black men.
Well, there's a war going on outside. No one is safe from. You could run, but you can't hide. From these streets that we done took, you walking with your head down, scared to look. You're shook. It's a war against black men. It has been since we got here, our inception of America, the first slave that was brought to these shores. Why is it a war against us? Why do we have a target on our back?
That's a good question, and I'm going to go to I'm gonna reference a book that I read called Lost Tribes in the Promised Lands: A History of Racism in the Americas. This book, at one point, was $2,000 for this book. About this book.
One book?
It's a book. I just told you. I'm gonna tell you again. It's called Lost Tribes in the Promised Lands: The History of Racism in the Americas. It's written by a Jewish rabbi, right? Caucasian Jewish rabbi, who talked about when Caucasians first came to the Americas and saw the people, right? But it goes further back than that. So the part about the struggle with us, which ties into this book, is the Council of Nicaea in 305 AD. When Europe decided they was going to go to Africa and take Africa, and they had these reports on who the people were, what were their customs. Like, they were talking in Europe about this stuff already. It's called the Council of Nicaea, right? And they're talking about, the Dutch is going to take this part and we're going to take that part.
It was
divvying up the world. So
already.
They discussed their tactics on certain things they were going to do, but the premise of why, so people say, why black people were slaves. I'm pretty sure a lot of people ask that question. Right. Why black people? And I've like, again, I took African American history in college, and the reason that was given by a white author of the textbook said, well, natives, they couldn't enslave natives because natives knew the land too well, so they could easily slip away and blend in. And they couldn't enslave whites.
They tried to. They did.
But they could enslave blacks because blacks stood out everywhere they were because they didn't look like the normal people.
Because of their color.
Which is actually not true according to the books that I've read.
What?
Because in America, the first people who were encountered were not what you call Native American. They called them Ethiopians. They said, these blacks in the Americas look extremely similar to the Ethiopians, except their hair was straighter. That was the only difference. They had straighter hair than the Ethiopians, but they said they classified the blacks here as Ethiopians. And then they studied them even further. But I'm gonna just tie this. I just want to come to this conversation so we can open this conversation. Why us? Let me say this first, so then you could jump in. Why us? In 305, they took biblical verses, the story of Noah. Had 3 sons, remember? Ham, Shem, and Japheth. They call him Japheth, but his name was Japheth, right? 3 sons, it says. And Ham looked on the nakedness of his father, and he wasn't supposed to do that, right? He saw his father uncovered. And Shem and Japheth walked backwards with a blanket and covered their father and said, Ham, you shouldn't have saw him naked or saw his nakedness, right? So Noah says, cursed be Canaan, for he shall be a servant unto his brethren. Noah said that, right? So Europeans took that statement and said black people will be a servant to white people. This is in the book.
Right.
But let me finish. So black people will be a servant unto white people. Therefore, we can go enslave them because black people came from Ham. So here's the refutement of that argument. If somebody saw you do something and you said, F you, that's a curse, right?
Yeah.
Noah was saying that to his son. It didn't say God said it. Noah said it. And this is another strange thing. If your son Ham saw you naked, why would you curse Ham's firstborn and not him? Why would you say something about your son is going to be a servant to the rest of his brethren? And Ham wasn't Canaan wasn't Ham's only son. You know, he had more sons. Why would you say, "Cursed be your first son, your firstborn," because you saw me naked? You know what I'm saying? So they said, and this, I'm wondering if this is going to blow up on the internet. This is the core reason why white people justify enslaving black people. The biblical verse that says, Canaan shall serve his brethren. That is the reason. I researched it through other books. That's the reason.
MLK was talking about this one of his speeches, one of his interviews, I should say, on how indoctrination or scripture have empowered racists or empowered white supremacy to justify their actions on slavery. And you know, we know through false information or false doctrine how it was justified by the slaveholders of their actions. They knew they were doing wrong. Joy Leary was speaking about this too. Mm-hmm. She was talking about, do you think slave owners with the church? Do you think slave owners pay tithes to their church and everything like that? They did all these things, but they did all these things, but they justified their actions through these indoctrinations and through these interpretations. And and she was also speaking about, we had some of the most brutal people, those psychopaths, those Jeffrey Dahmers, those Casey's or whatever, mm-hmm. on the slave fields doing these things to other human beings. So I mean, there was no mental health check on a slave master. Mm-hmm. So I mean, they could do anything to the enslaved person. Whatever sick demonic thing that they have. I was in a museum. I think it was in the Netherlands. I was in Amsterdam. They had a museum on torture, and all the crazy demonic things that you can think of to do to a human being, the sick psychotic things you can do to a human being, people were doing on slave fields. Mm-hmm. So there was no buffer to say you couldn't, because they owned you as a property. So, this is what happened through chattel slavery. Mm-hmm. And how does one justify all this stuff? And they did it through their belief system, their church, their doctrine. They write it, and you see some of these things that are manifesting right now on the internet with some of these white supremacists of justifying white supremacy. Mm-hmm. So we got to check, what you're reading and where the source is coming from. The same thing you talk about Hitler, you talk about Stalin. These people were learned people, but they indoctrinated doctrines that were crazy, that were false.
A lot of that is rituals. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of rituals that was practiced and still practiced to now, to today's time. So it's it's a different type of mindset, who people worship and things like that. So mm-hmm. it's so embedded, in America, that it even overlapped into other cultures and people adopting some of their ways.
Well, I look at it like this, and I agree with you. It's these different twists, and I can say in most religions, what is practiced is not everything. It's not really everything in the book. It's added stuff, cultural stuff, different. I see that, and what I came to understand, going back to this book that I read, it was a very impactful book. This Jewish rabbi, and not the only Jewish rabbi, this Jewish rabbi had an account of what took place in the Americas when Columbus and De las Casas and all these different people came here. And they wrote down what they encountered. So here goes some disturbing things that they encountered. And it's going to circle back to the Bible. So let me go to the Bible first. The Old Testament, and I hear a lot of people say, oh, the book doesn't talk about color. It does. Actually does. It says Adam was made from mud. Right? What color is mud? That's the first question. I never seen pale white mud. But if you see a picture of Adam and Eve, pale white people in the garden, right? Adam is made from mud. Here goes another thing from Moses. Anybody seen what was that movie called? The Ten Commandments? Yeah. What miracle did they exclude from the Ten Commandments?
But this is like Hollywood.
Yeah, but this specific reasons why I'm linking it. I'm laying a case right now.
Okay.
What specific miracle that Moses performed? You saw him do the one with the snake, turn it to the staff, and his staff turned into a snake and ate the other snakes of the wizards. You saw him hit the water and it parted the water. Which one did they exclude from the movie? I can tell you which one it was. He took his hand and put it to his chest and it came out pale white as a miracle to show, and then he put it back to his chest and it came to his regular color of his flesh. Which means Moses wasn't pale white. It's in the book. It's in every Bible. It's in every Torah. That wasn't in the movie. Because they say there's no color in the Bible, but that's a lie. Kedar means black. Israel's face is Kedar. It says that in the Bible. The Hebrews I'm talking about. So now fast forward to this book. The Lost Tribes in the Promised Land, History of Racism in Americas. They said the 10 tribes is lost. These Jewish rabbis said, no, they live in America. And we know they live in America, and they keep all the laws and speak the language, and we killed them anyway. That's what the book says. That's not the only book I have that says that. I have one called James Adair is the author. The History of the North American Indian. He's saying the same thing. Black, not the ones you see that look pale. Black people, not only him, Glenn Beck, had a show on TV. On his show showed they found in a burial mound in America, Hebrew, with all the commandments, buried in an area where black people was. Pre-slavery. He said, who are these people that we keep saying is savages and are Gentiles? Who are these people? Because they're clearly not. So this is my point. This is not about religion. This is about who we are as a people. There was a reason why. And where did the Hebrews live? They lived in Africa. There was a reason why certain people was rounded up and sold. If you go back to the book of Deuteronomy, it says, you will be captured and sold into slavery to lands you know not by way of ships. This is not just Bible, this is Torah. By way of ships, and you will serve for 400 years and till the fields and never reap the rewards. Your women will be raped, the men will be imprisoned, nobody will free them, everybody will call you this, everybody would take away your name, your culture, boom, boom, boom. You will worship other gods. That didn't happen to nobody else except black people. It's in the book of Deuteronomy, lays it all out. So how could now, there's this song that I love called Royalty by Molly Music.
Modern music. You know.
Oh man, this guy. He has this song called Royalty, and he's saying, first we weren't the people, now we are the people. People told us we niggas. There was never a group of people ever called niggas that God created. They were not called niggas. But somebody else gave us a name.
Right.
Somebody else told us who we are, and then somebody else said, and by the way, we this.
Right. It's institutionalized racism, white supremacy kind of puts categorizes the whole rest of the world. So if you're looking through the world through colonizer or oppressor, they're going to label it how they want it to it. And unfortunately, this is how our education system is still brought up, and this is how the things are indoctrinated. When the British said the sun never sets on the British Empire and how they colonized the whole world. They are trying to colonize or change the world into their liking and their understanding of it. Unfortunately, we know that there's so many different ways of being and ways of doing things, and black people have been doing it since the beginning of humanity itself. Because if you're talking about the first person in humanity is a black person, from Africa, then the whole humanity is. But if you have a mindset of white supremacists of thinking that I've discovered this, I've created this, I've did this, and it's me, I'm first of doing this, and I set the standard for the world, then that this is what the doctrine that we're all under.
So let me tell you,
that we're trying to see things.
Let me jump into that a little bit more, because I like how you phrase that. So what we're looking at in society and our structures is a wolf portrayed the sheep as the wolf and himself as the sheep so he could continue eating sheep. So that's what we're looking at, right? So in the paradigm of, oppressors and going around and renaming stuff, the people who wrote history are the ones who basically ran around and did all of this stuff. Right. Look at the concept. Adam created and named everything, right? So everything's already named, and now somebody else is going around naming everything again, right? So these are the concepts. So I say this to people all the time, and it's not to be religious. This is not a conversation in religion. Mm-hmm. But if you read the books for what it says, even if you're taking it from a story perspective, right? I've done this through years of study. Eat ye not of this tree, of the fruit of this tree, for it will surely corrupt you, right? And you will die. That's the message that's sent to Adam, right?
Right.
Here's the thing. Tree, roots, fruit, children.
Okay.
People don't make that correlation. In the Hebrew, mix ye not with these people, for they are corrupt, and you will surely die if you mix with them. In the Hebrew.
Right.
But in the English, it's a tree with a fruit. It's an allegory. So wait a minute. Adam is not the first person. He's the first human, but he's not the first person. Other things was here.
Of course.
Right? So this is the conversation. If you go into the Hebrew, this is the conversation that they all understand.
Right.
Adam is the first man, but there are others that we look like, and you could get it from Sodom and Gomorrah story.
Right.
When
like
fire and brimstone came down Sodom and Gomorrah,
right.
two angels that looked like men came, and the men tried to rape them.
So me as an artist, I always think things as metaphor and have meaning within the meaning. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So like an abstract kind of thing. When you say that, there's a meaning within that meaning. Mm-hmm. So there's something underlying that
multi-layered
was trying to say and trying to express. And when you translate it from one language to another, sometimes the meaning sometimes gets lost. Mm-hmm. There's a different type of meaning into it. Mm-hmm. So always looking at something deeper than what the surface is.
Translation and transliteration. Mm. Those are two different things. Mm. One is made to sound like the original word, but it can have a different meaning. Right. So a lot of the stuff that we have is transliterated, not translated. So yeah, that's a heavy thing. But I wanted to give you that kind of background because I've read a lot of books like this.
Right.
This book called The History of the North American Indian by James Adair, that book is $5,000.
Right.
Okay. These books that you can't find in the
You can't
stores.
store it. But it's just also like me actually being, it's just going to some places where you have Native Americans used to roam, and like going to the Great Plains of the Midwest, going to like Missouri, going to Arkansas, and seeing where the buffalo used to reign, or when the people used to be existing, and they no longer exist. So in memory of and walking on the Trail of Tears, and having that experience of actually walking on the trail where people have basically been taken off their land. It's almost like a spiritual experience, because you can see the trauma, what a person went through. Same thing is like going to like Goree Island to West Africa and going to the slave dungeons, where you see human beings were once housed here. So it's just as a human experience, and imagining yourself as another human being going through this experience, the trauma that you is, and just the overall being present of what a human suffering was, and people actually went through. Is life shifting. So when we talk about doctrine, and we talk about like scripture, and what people from the past are basically have written down, that what their experiences that they've been through, like when you go into like sometimes religious doctrine and actual things that actually happened. So it's part of the human experience. This is how we learn. This is how we get religion, things to do and not to do, and it's shifting. It's definitely, but it's a whole study in itself.
Well, I think a lot of information when it comes just religion and books is so much unfound history, so much unfound documentation. So there's a lot of stories when it comes to that, how it aligns. So you're talking about that can be one of the major reasons why when you look at black men and how we fit into this, I think that a lot of people have conformed to that indoctrination. So when you look at the black man who's continued to fight, with so many things surrounding him, and not to say that it's just a black man, but I'm just saying from this aspect of what we're talking about now, that's almost like the last survivor of the I am, because it's either people have conformed, they are part, or they just succumb.
It's like a global conspiracy to suppress something, and like we the last holdouts. Like we're not going to go with it. We're not going to go with it. I feel like that's and there's this war against us. So I'm gonna throw out a statistic. The 2018 they did a census poll talking about the black community, right? And they said that it's about 46 million black people, but 10% of that number is foreign black, not born in this country, right? And it said actually 36.6% is, black born in this country,
Right.
who self-identified, right? Self-identified. But I look at the stats and it's like we were 12% of the community, now we 14% of America. But our numbers haven't drastically increased, right? What are some of the reasons you would cite for not having a drastic increase in numbers?
Well, this is the thing. We got to look as human beings. We're black people living in America. We're still human beings, and we got to look at, like I said, think of things at a global scale, right? Human beings migrate, they move, they change their settings. We try to go to the places that are best suited for our survival and production. So North America, we've been here. We were brought here against our will, but we didn't necessarily stay here. And then we travel. Human beings, we develop. We find new ways of doing things. If this place is not the end all be all, we're going to find another place. So as the statistics here in America, you also think about the history of like people in migration, of how we move about. We don't stay in one place. And as our discovery, as our mind grows, and we discover that we don't have to always be here. We can get up and leave. So this goes to another conversation of like black people, where are we headed and where are we going? And he's talking about this thing of nationalism and Pan-Africanism. of what future are we going to set for ourselves? Because this nation has created, but we can also create something else. So I mean, especially as Black people, is it's not benefiting us? Are we going to try to do something different?
Right.
It goes that go back to scripture. Some people say we want to move to a promised land. What is our promised land? Maybe this is go to another spiritual thing and like a scriptural thing, but that's a whole nother.
Well, over the course of time, it's hard to find a Native American. Let's just say that. So when you look at Planned Parenthood, right, that's designed. So you look at how many blacks women have had abortions, right? That's a whole atrocity right there to Black people. When you look at the healthcare system, where blacks were not even treated right. So the Black women having babies, the prenatal care. Like there's so many factors that go into that. Why the numbers are not rising, which is designed for a reason.
I want to jump on that because here's something that many Black people might overlook. Did you ever hear Black people say stuff like, "Yo, I got Indian in my family"? Did you ever hear like Black African Americans say that?
In the past.
Okay.
A long time ago.
So here's an interesting thing. This is what the book is saying. And not just what the book is saying. You look at me. I look Black, right? Because I'm Black, right? I am Black. My mother was full-blood Cherokee. My father was partial Cherokee. We know about the slaves that came over in the boat. Nobody talked about the depopulation of the Americas, of the people who was here.
The genocide.
Not just a genocide, they also shipped them out. Well, rather us.
Yeah.
So this is a conversation that doesn't happen and this is interesting. Like go to, there's a name that if you go to the Torah, it says that the Hebrews use, and only the Hebrews could use his name for the Most High. And even when you talk to Jewish people, I'm talking about Caucasian Jewish people, when they read the name, they don't say it. They use another name because they say it's a sacred name, they don't say it. But when you watch old Westerns and they had the natives going around the pole saying "Haya, Haya, Haya, Haya,"
But it's like
that's not the name. They chopped up the name. They were saying Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. That's the Hebrew name that only the Hebrews supposed to use.
But this is why I go back to like a hip hop reference. Go back to PE. He said, "Burn Hollywood, burn," because Hollywood gives you an image of somebody.
A savage.
Yeah, but the images that we see in Hollywood for Black people, Native Americans, or Native people, everybody, has always been something other.
A savage.
It's always been a
Less than
negative.
human.
Yeah, it's always been a negative stereotype, and it goes into their narrative of white supremacy. I mean, all Hollywood, you can see it through Cleopatra. You can see it through Hollywood. Hollywood is just like an imagery of white supremacists and all this other thing that give you something that they see how they see the world.
It's a machine.
So it's a correlation I'm just making about, because Dominic, you had stepped out, but Dominic has said you don't really see a lot of natives around, right? Indigenous people. And I'm saying to him, people look at me and say, "You Black," because I'm Black, right? My mother was full-blood Cherokee. Father was partial Cherokee. Because Cherokees are Black. But you're not going to hear no Cherokee say that, right? You're not going to hear Choctaws say that. You're not going to hear certain people say these things because according to the books, they were all Black. When the Europeans got here, they met dark-skinned people. Period. The ones that Christopher Columbus killed, the Tainos was dark-skinned.
The Taino Indians.
They were all dark-skinned.
Right.
So the point is,
Talk about
we have a conversation about the concept of what a native is. I remember back in the day it says, "Don't start forest fires," and the commercials, and they had a guy with this big nose and he had the feathers on and he was crying because somebody started a fire and he wasn't taking care of the earth. And I found out later that was played by an Italian guy with makeup on. You see what I'm saying? So the idea of who a native is, we gotta have a conversation. I went to powwows. Okay, yeah. I went to powwows and they had people with blonde hair and blue eyes asking me if I was really native, but they supposed to be native.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like
That's
it's an interesting
it's
thing.
an interesting thing, because like when I was in, if you go to like the Carib Indian, what they call them Caribbean, but you have Native people who are there as well. Like our family was from Barbados, but when you have the indigenous people who are from those islands, the Carib Indian, and then you have the people who were brought to that island, you have the Africans, and then the other people who came to the island, the Europeans. So we have the mix of all those people and those cultures, and people don't understand or forget, or it's not documented, that Native people were there already existing, had civilizations, had ways of doing things, had a way of governing before European settlers came. And these people who mix with people who are still there, that they speak different languages now. If you go to the Midwest, you'll call them Mexicans, but these are people who are basically colonized by Spaniards and the Native people who like the Maya or the Apache, or people are still there, but they were colonized by the Spaniards. Now they speak Spanish, and they call Mexico, and it was ousted of California. But these people are still exist. They're still here, but we don't talk about these people. And this so-called history of America.
We make fun of them. Some people make fun of them, right?
Right.
But let me say this. You just touched on the next thing I want to say. Mexicans. Before they were colonized, and I know the answer to the question, what language did they speak?
The native language.
What was the native language? I can tell you.
Whether it be Apache,
I can tell
whether
you.
it be Maya.
It's a derivative of Hebrew. That's what I said. When they came here, lost tribes in the promised lands, the Americas, not America, the continent, the whole continent of the Americas was populated by black people who they said was the 10 tribes that was lost.
South America.
But that's not talked about.
That's what I'm saying.
That's the issue, because we are so caught up with
history.
Not only that blacks coming to America, and it's eliminate the blacks that were already here.
That's what I'm saying.
That story is never told. We talk about the slavery part, but there was a whole race and generation of people already here that was eliminated.
Check out also the book that came before Columbus, which you're talking about, because when we always talking about history, we always talking about European history and starting from there. So the European age of discovery is how we basically put our history, but there's other histories, you know what I'm saying? But since we're talking English, and we've been indoctrinated to, most of the world speaks English because of European colonization, and made it a language of everything. But there was other languages and other documentations of books and things that were happening before European discovery. So if you look into like Rasul Miller, who's also a study of Islamic studies, and that was me traveling to like West Africa and going to some of their libraries and seeing that the languages, history was documented by other people, like within Arabic in the Arabic world, and it was a different understanding of history and how things work. When I was living in Arabia, and going to some of their museums, when they said North American, they first said Mexico and Native American. They didn't. When they looked at a white person or a person of European descent, they said European. And when they said looked at a person of African descent or people with darker skin, they said African. So it's whose history you coming through and what lens are you seeing? You know what I'm saying? So this is from our view. So this is from our vantage point. But again, whose history and whose view are you looking at, and how you're looking at the world? Right. And unfortunately, since we've been indoctrinated and our minds been colonized by Europeans for a lot of part of the world, you're looking through history and the world through their lens. We're not looking into the people who are indigenous and those people who are here. We did document it, but where are those books? Where are these information? And how it is not, these things are not being taught in our school system. And it goes back to more present, more prestigious, more prestigious, but more presentation, more viewer, or more visibility to Native people, African people, and other people who has always been here.
The funny thing to that is, white people know the history.
Some.
Some. I say most, because they're able to manipulate it. Blacks don't know none of this.
Because they're teaching us about run, spot, run, and they're teaching us about things that, you know, in the process of learning how to read. With, I'm going to say it, we fill our heads with useless garbage. So you can learn how to read and learn about who you are at the same time. That could be your reading exercise, rather than learning about stories, fictitious stories that's supposed to expand your mind. You know, learn about who you are, because that's the missing element in a lot of us. Like, I ask people, what tribe are you from? And they stumble. What tribe are you from? You go to most white people and you ask them that, they can tell you the answer. But we can't. Because by design, they don't want us to know what tribe we're from. I'm saying in general, society-wise, because if we knew what tribe we was from and didn't find pride in that, and said, damn, we was Superman? Okay, maybe we could get back to being Superman.
It has history, but that's the same thing what Malcolm was saying. He was talking about, if you think you haven't done anything, you won't do anything. So knowing who you are, knowing that, especially with black people, we have built civilizations, we have built cities before the Americas. And you think about America, it's only about a couple of 100 years old. And you're thinking about the kingdoms of Morocco, you're thinking about who predate America, who predate Columbus. I mean, just traveling yourself out, in a lot of societies, you know, think about Iran, you think about Iraq, you think about Mesopotamia. When you start traveling the world, you understand that civilization's been existing pre-America. You understand that America is a new jack on the scene.
Yeah, very much.
We're talking about, a statehood, a countryhood. So you got to look at world history. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not being educated of world history. They're just talking about American history or European history, and not talking about the history of human beings as its entirety and as a whole. Because I believe in Ubuntu, you know, mankind is one. We share only one humanity, and once we know more, you know, we can do more.
I feel like, and I feel you on that conversation, but there's an underlying racism, underlying supremacy that's not just white. That's not just white, and part of it is difficult for me to navigate. And I'm going to say it because it's trust issues.
But it goes back to your album talking about race. You know, people set up race to race against each other.
Right.
Not to. I mean, for me, for like if you go into the scripture, it says we made into nations to try so we can know with each other, to help with each other, build each other up. Not to race against us, compete against each other, but to build each other up. But I mean, it goes into race. But the other paradigm and the other way of thinking is we're made into races to compete and to race against each other.
And even competing and racing against each other is not
theory.
It's not bad if the goal is to everybody gains, right? So sometimes friendly competition is good if it's friendly.
Right.
But the thing is, my challenge comes in where you have, okay, so let's talk about two groups. Africans, which Hebrews are Africans, right? I'm going to say that. People are going to be like, oh, Hebrews are not Africans. Yeah, they came from, somebody was called this, and they was Africans, right? But you had groups who didn't like them, who warred against them, right? And sold them. It's written in the books. Now, the other group that also sold black people for longer than anybody else was the Middle East Arabs.
Yeah, I would say Arabs.
Well, you also got to talk about the Arab slave trade.
So
history,
it's longer than anybody's slave. It's 1,000 years.
Right. Arab slave trade, like living in Africa, if you go to places like Mesopotamia, you go to, I was in Senegal, so right above is Mauritania. So Mauritania, you know, the history of slavery and Arab colonization, you know, it's definitely prevalent in Africa. That's what I was talking about, like world history, and not necessarily just European history. So, you know, like the Arab slave trade did happen, and it happened, you know, a little bit like for some time, and people don't really talk about that. But it was different between like American chattel slavery and you talk about like Arab slavery. It's still slavery, but it was a different type of slavery. American chattel slavery was the worst form of slavery because it basically dehumanized a person, a human being. And but when you talk about the Arab, because when you had Arab slave trade, you had people marrying into families. You can marry yourself out of slavery, or you can become indoctrinated into the society, change your status in a different way.
It's still slavery.
It's still slavery. Yes.
My thing is it's almost like trauma comparison.
Trump, yeah.
My trauma is still slavery. However we put it, like it's still slavery, and I think collectively across the board, it need to be speaked about collectively across the board because who were they enslaving?
Right.
That's the question right there.
But
that's
so
my point.
like
But
it don't care if it was Arabs, don't care if it was white. Who were they enslaving?
Right, but like I said, when I talk about world history, and you're talking about like Arabs and Arabs in Arabia, and they're inhumane treating to themselves, burying their
female
daughters,
children,
and uncivilized kind of behavior. And you got to know the history of like the world, and like I said, when we talking about history, you only look at it for a European lens. But like the Arab history, and through their lens, they think that they were civilized and everything like that. But they went through a dark age and dark period and ignorant stage of their development as well. So when we think we got to have like an organic like a hit of the history of mankind. So I mean, when we talking about like religion, and you talk about like Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and where it sprung out of, and these areas of Egypt, Mesopotamia, Iran, Iraq, like Gaza, the birth of human of civilization, and this is like the fight that people were always going through. This is like how can I put the words? It's like historical, biblical. You can put it biblical because this is like the struggle we constantly go through, and this is a debate that Christians, Judaism, and Islam go through about the suffering and the humanity, and what religion is supposed to help you with is how to be more humane to human beings, and how do we conduct ourselves on this planet and while we're here. So. When you go into indoctrinations, whose books and who things are most humane to civilization, and who basically helps humanity the best, and that's what we should be competing against. Who's the most just instead of who's the most terrible and horrific. But unfortunately, this is the history that we're going through because we've been through it, and this trauma is still going on.
So all this is said to get to our meat of our conversation, because now that was a lot right there. That was a prep. That was a prep just to have this conversation. So economics, silent war against black men.
Right. Yeah.
So we said that there's a lot of stuff with the mind state, there's a lot of violence, but now we kind of laid a partial framework of who we are.
Right.
Even if we don't want to acknowledge who we are, I just gave you some information, and of course I'm going to have the facts listed here with the names of the books and even page numbers.
Again,
because I read these books.
Read the books, but again, this is our viewpoint. This is how we view things.
If you can afford the books, that's the question.
Well, now you can get cheap copies for $20 on Amazon now. They do reprints now.
Okay.
So that's another one. So people, but the thing is, we gotta investigate. We gotta academically check sources. We gotta look at stuff, right? Research. Also, Dr. Claude Anderson, I'm going to put his link at the bottom, too, for his books, because that's the economic portion of this conversation. So, this secret war against us. So, I say that there's a secret war against black men that's not called a war. It's called the war on drugs. It's called the war on crime. It's called everything else except a war. And it's always been against... Now I'm not excluding black women, so I don't want to get a bunch of angry male, but if somebody has a different opinion as to who is wearing the target on their back, please send me that, because I'm clear that it's the black male got the target. And there is a systematic, ingrained system to keep us out of the system. Jobs, representation. Yeah, we could get a few gangster roles on TV shows and movies and the bad guy. We could get that, right? But who's writing that script? We're not writing the script. So whoever's writing the script is going to write us as the bad guy, right? All the time. We're never the hero, and if we are in some kind of heroic role, there's something got to be wrong with us, mentally or physically.
Demasculation.
You can't have just a black man winning. You know, you just can't. There's something got to be wrong with us. We gotta, you know, and I'm not no shade on the Star Trek series and all that, but they had, remember Geordi? He was blind. He was a black blind man, and and the other ones who was black was Cleons. You know, like the bad guys.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I noticed stuff like
this. You put it
this.
into fictional characters, but understand the fiction is based off of some type of reality. It's
their perception.
Even if you go to like like the Marvel.
Don't spill that because we got another one on Marvel.
Yeah, but I'm just saying we base our imagination off of the things that we based off some type of reality or trying to escape it. So some things do have truth. Art does have some truth into it.
Marvel is a whole nother conversation, a whole nother show, and I got props for that too.
Yeah.
So we gonna get into that another show.
But yeah, art imitates life, and you know, and sometimes life imitates art. But we want to try to keep it creative and trying to keep our things going.
That's their perception, though. They go back to Planet of the Apes. Like it's a lot. It's a lot of how they see. They created the narrative so good that it almost seemed like the victim is the oppressor.
Yes,
that's the same thing Mark was talking about. Yeah,
here's a trick. They create a narrative, right? They know it's a created narrative, but over time they believe the narrative. Because if you talk to their children believe it hook, line, and sinker.
Right.
And the narrative about black men we are the bad ones, and they are the good ones. And I'm not gonna give my personal opinion as to who the bad ones and the good ones, but that's BS. Because look at all you gotta do is go through the list with the track record. Killed this many people, took this. We didn't do that. We didn't come in and take somebody else's land. We didn't do that. And I just want to throw this out because it's an atrocious number. Henry Louis Gates said that, Dr. Henry Louis Gates said that...
cool guy, by the way.
He passed away?
No, I said he's a cool guy.
I was going to say, wait a minute. Woo! Okay. Said that the estimated death toll in the transatlantic slave trade was 125 to 150 million. Here's a statistic nobody talks about. Imagine 200 million people being on this continent that are no longer here when the white man came.
Yeah.
Just wiped out.
200 million.
Yeah.
Nobody could tout those numbers. Nobody, because Genghis Khan can't type those numbers. Nobody could be like, yo, I killed this many people.
That's world history.
That's crazy.
That is crazy.
So
that's just like a whole genocide.
But if there's a list for bad guy behavior, we don't match it. If there was a negative list that we could be put on, it could be petty stuff out of ignorance. Stuff out of lack of knowledge, it could be that. But I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if any of us killing 200 million people and taking whole continents. I don't know about any of that. And then indoctrinate a concept of no repentance and no restitution is needed to the wounded party. I don't know we never done that. But this conversation about the secret war, there's an attack on black men that goes to behavior modification. Like, there's a certain way we speak depending on who the audience is.
Right. It's coded
we
language.
Modify
We talk about coded language.
Our behavior and our speech so people won't feel scared of us.
It's going back to the whole mental health, because if you can't express how you really feel, then you're suffering inside. So that's a key piece that's not being talked about, because we are portrayed so much just because you're black and you got size automatic. People are fearful. It's the narrative that been created
fear
that
of the
have
big black man.
Yeah,
the boogeyman. That's what it is. It's just the big boogeyman.
Well, but that fear is grounded in something, and the fear is again, I can't tell you how many. I'm an avid reader. I read books written by a lot of white people, a lot of people in general, but scholars.
Right.
The fear is, and I've read this in a book, where a white person said, "Thank God that he has not brought about justice. Because if he brought justice, we would be no more."
Right, but well, I mean,
that's a heavy conversation.
It's a heavy conversation. You ever read this? There was a play called Ethiopia and the Bar of Justice. It was an old play that we used to do like when we was a kid. Like, you know, and this is the same thing about bringing the atrocities of America to the world court, and not necessarily having it through a civil court. Because if you localize it, if you put a measuring stick of the atrocities that happen to African and Native people, and you put it to the world standard, you would say, okay, there's nothing wrong here. You know what I'm saying? You got to point the finger at some. You know, there's a big elephant, and that's
your books don't add up.
Yeah, your books don't.
Somebody fudged the books.
Something that's that doesn't seem right.
You got some offshore accounts.
Yeah. So I mean,
numbers are not matching.
That's what it is. So I mean, and the thing about it is like. People could see that, and that's what they're afraid of. That's the fear. It's just like if I'm a criminal, why would I want to give myself in if I'm living it up?
You are going to have all of your bullets and all of your guns honed in on the ones who could bring you in, so they can't bring you in. You're gonna fight till you run. You're gonna start throwing rocks if you run out of bullets, so they can't take you.
Yeah.
And this is what the problem is. The acts are criminal. The acts are severe, but there's a facade of, I didn't do nothing wrong. I don't know what they talking about. They just complaining.
They're all on code. That's one. So it's even if they haven't participated, they're still on code to support it.
Yeah,
they benefited from it, but they're on code.
Right.
Us as black people, we're not on code.
Right.
This is why it continued to happen, because we're not on code as a people. It's just like
it's like white privilege.
Yeah, if you're supporting that, right? If this is a person that then, let's say, killed 5 people, right? And then we're saying, hey, he didn't kill 5 people. They just as sick as the person that killed the 5.
Right.
They're covering up, knowing that, hey, this is wrong. So this is what they don't want to be accountable. That's number one. They don't want to look at themselves, and they don't want to admit that, hey, this was wrong. Because admitting wrong takes a lot. From a human perspective.
Yeah, but I mean,
humility.
It takes humility, but it also starts the healing. That's what I'm talking about, truth and reconciliation. And this is this conversation that America didn't have with chattel slavery. I mean, people acknowledged it, but they haven't started to fix it yet. So I mean, the problem is, and this is why we're always going to have a problem, is because people haven't started to fix it. When I think I'm quoting Malcolm X again, it's like when you have you stab somebody in the back, and when a person takes the knife out, and you apologize, it doesn't start to heal until you first acknowledge it, but you have to take the knife out and start mending the wound. But people haven't even yet taken out the knife yet. So I mean, you have to acknowledge the problem and keep on trying to heal it and fix the problem. I mean, this is what was so-called. This is why we need reparations. And cut a check, because you can quantify it, but then again, sometimes some things are unquantifiable. You can't the amount of trauma, the amount of stress, the amount of things that have been going on generationally, and still affecting people is still a problem. But again, it's like you can't solve the problem with the same consciousness that caused it.
Right. Well, here's the thing.
Outside force.
Here's the thing. Economically, right? we talk about reparations, we talk about getting money, you know, and one of the things I've saw.
We say reparations. It doesn't have to be. It could be.
It needs to be more than money.
Yeah, economic is.
But money, but the cut the check need to happen,
yeah,
right?
Cut the check definitely got to happen.
Okay,
But
as long as we on agreement
that's
cut
only
the check need to happen.
that's only one part of it.
But let me say this:
we have to have restitution, but it's just one part of it. Now you're talking about the psychological, the emotional, the educational, the other things about it. So cutting the check is only one.
So let me say this
but
too,
it's still
because
more things to go into.
you have a person who's like pedophile, right? You have a person who's a pedophile, and today, if you commit pedophilia, having sex with a person underage, don't you go into this sex registry?
Yeah.
Right? So it's interesting when people say, well, you can't apply today's laws to. Yes, you can. If killing is bad today, it was bad back then. If rape was bad today, it was bad back then. It was always bad, even if you don't acknowledge it.
Truth is
so
truth.
so if
Truth
a person, the people on the printed on our money was pedophiles too. The people printed on our money was terrorists too, and rapists, and all of the above.
Right.
So it's a thing where people want to have a happy story about somebody, right, or tell a story of their nobility when they had slaves. And I said this before. I had a debate with a Pulitzer Prize winning. I think he was in sociology or something I was taking, and we was talking about Aristotle and the great minds of the European world, and I was saying if they owned slaves, they weren't great. Yeah. And he was so livid, but we actually had a debate and he lost. And he says, I never want to debate against you again. And I was a student. He said, I never want to debate against you because you know your stuff. Don't tell me all this great philosophies and expanded minds of somebody who couldn't value another human life and said it was property. Yeah. I can't understand how advanced you can be. It's the opposite of advancement. Right. But this is the conversation. So we're talking about, economics. And again, while we were marching and trying to get people to accept us just to be, people was getting compound interest on their investments. And they were earning money, and we couldn't earn money. And the little money that we earned, going back to Dr. Claude Anderson, we gave to them. But by integrating.
But you got to think about this root and how this economic system was built. You're talking about insurance. You're talking about banking. You're talking about the whole facet of that. It was all coming from slavery. Because the slaveholders had to go to banks. They had to get insured. They had to go. So the whole system, like I said, to its core, is you got to go to the root, and the root is right. And unfortunately, when you breaking it down, you go into the religion, like I said, how to justify this thing of stealing people's farmland. I think one of my family members went through this. They had a piece of land, and they were swindled out of it. So I mean, the economic growth of that land could have been, the generations after, could have been profiting and benefiting off of it. It should have been, but they were swindled out of it. So I mean, these economic effects, are still happening, and the people are still feeling the repercussions of it. And the same thing, like the government were not lending to black people to build, get property and build equity and everything like that. It builds up, It's just like again, it's sweeping everything under the rug. And eventually, if you don't clean under the rug, that rug is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
You're gonna have a Mount Everest.
Well, we gotta remove the rug.
Remove the rug and clean up the dirt.
And like reparation is a new rug, and I feel like people gotta stop saying what blacks are gonna do with their money. Like all other coaches then got their money. Nobody questioned what they're gonna do. So if Tyrone or somebody want to do whatever, it doesn't matter. Like they just gotta give the money because it's keep being a justification of reparation for us, right? Yeah. But we got billions of dollars for a country, right? I'm not gonna say whatever country it is. We got hundreds of $1 million for refugees over here, but you got nothing for the atrocity that happened to black people right here in this country.
I agree.
So I'm tired of tap dancing around what blacks gonna do with their money. Why should they get? It's money going out, so they got money. We have to stop believing the narrative that there's no money and there's to compensate for what was done.
But I think along with getting reparations, there's also be education with it, because economic education, and that's one thing that's never been taught in school is your economic situation. I mean, that's the last thing people talk about is it's like sex and economics. It's like you have to educate people properly so they can survive in this world and in this changing world in the 21st century. So I mean, it has to be updated. So I mean, you can't just you can have definitely reparations, but what do we do with the money when we receive it? If you give a fool $1 million, you have a fool with $1 million. You get me? Saying so you got to be definitely educated about how to become empowered, so you won't be unempowered. I mean, you won't be going to that situation again. So that economic education is definitely premise and is not being taught in our school system, and how to be empowered.
So I'll get back to what I was saying. I have a song where I'm saying, "Get your hands up on my pocket," and I have the IRS symbol with the money. And some people who saw the video was like, "What are you talking about?" Think about this from a concept. You enslave people, you make them work for free. You take away all their rights, don't let them become citizens. And then you start taxing them, but they're not represented in society the way everybody else is. Taxation without representation. So it's my belief, this is me, one portion of the reparations is black people should not be paying any taxes to this government. Because the government did this. The government helped corporations and individuals do this. So why are our taxes? So we say this a lot. Government got money for this, government, and that's true, but they don't have money for us. The money they're giving to people is our tax dollars. And they're not funneling this money back to us. So this is a crazy conversation. And we're going to wrap soon, but I wanted to bring this conversation home to why, this is my statement, black people is the cash cow for everybody. We the cash cow. They're going to show a video on TV that say, donate this to whatever fund, and they're going to show a black kid with a fly on his face. He don't swat the fly off. So people could donate. These people are poor. They don't have meals. Guess what else they do? They have money for not-for-profits, but they don't give the money to black not-for-profits.
Well, why are they poor in the first place?
So, but this is the thing. Everybody uses us, right? We are the demonstration as to why you should donate. Think again, Black Lives Matter. All the protests and stuff we was having because we was tired of George Floyd, what happened? $100 million came to somebody and didn't reach us.
Right.
This is a story that never ends. It always winds up this way. So again, black money to help inner city youth. They don't call it black. And the statistic is black men is 48% of the population, black women 52%. That makes the black man the minority, but there's no programs for black men. But you say we have money for the urban community, and the money goes to non-black not-for-profits who take high salaries and dedicate peanuts to the actual program. And people wonder why we don't see the change we want to see. We are the cash cow for everybody. All you got to do is put up a famous basketball player. People's going to, they playing on this team. Everybody's going to pay the money to go see that player play. But the owner of the team is making the money off the ticket sales. We the cash cow for everybody. Record labels sign, artists. The artists go through the work of putting together a great product, and the record label reaps the biggest reward from the sale of the product. If y'all don't know what I'm talking about you getting 10%, the label getting the 90%, or whatever the case may be, and withholding a certain portion of your money, giving you a loan, and now you in debt. This is how this works. When you shoot a film and they say Black Panther made $300 million in sales or whatever numbers it made, I'm just making these numbers up. But the actual person, if a person paid for the filming of this film, like an example of Steve Harvey, it may cost him $10 million to make it. He sell the movie for $20 million, and then a distribution company that's not Black buys it, and they made $100 million. We the cash cow for everybody.
Yeah, but this is like the distribution. We don't own. This is the distribution channels of this country. It's always, like I said, it's structural racism. And if you don't own the masters, you don't own the form of distributing it and producing and getting out, you're always going to be subservient to those who do. So again, it goes to Black empowerment, Black economics, and again, in the book Law Richardson wrote, Black labor, white wealth. Like I said, we built it, but we're not benefiting from it. We don't see the proceeds and the profits from it. So it's just like saying, I built this neighborhood. Yeah, I built this brick by brick, but I don't own it, and I don't perceive any value and wealth that's coming from
No
it.
residual income.
That's what's happening with Black folks. So
taxes, all this is residual income for somebody else.
Yeah, and because we built this, let's saying it's like we built America, we built all these institutions. It's saying that this social thing, we marched this, and we could do this. We made Nike. Nike has a big sign of Colin Kaepernick, and they make billions of dollars off his image of his fight and his struggle, but don't necessarily give their money to the issues that caused the problem in the first place. No. So it goes back to...
It's another way to make money.
Right. So, I mean, again, we have to definitely place value in ourselves that know that we're valuable. We bring value to almost every situation. You know what I mean? Like Tommy Hilfiger made millions of dollars off of hip-hop music and how we are fashionable and how we rock the joint.
So the Timberland.
We made it popular. So, I mean, we have to have seats at the table on the corporate level, on the grassroots level, and all that was we have to get our reparations. We got to get our.
We got to start supporting our own. That's
not
the
just
most important thing, man.
It's not just a seat at the table at the corporate level. We got to be owners because it's different between having a seat at the table, but you work for somebody else. You the black face,
right?
For you the black face for the company,
right?
You know, like when Ketanji Brown Jackson said, "We made it." No, you made it. But you're gonna fight. You're gonna review law from constitutional law that's written by people who oppressed us. So, and I'm not trying to take away from what she got, but that doesn't mean things are going to change for us. She's one person, right? On a jury of many. But this economic conversation is we're going to have multiple parts for this economic conversation. So I'm a licensed life insurance and retirement plan salesperson for the state of New York. And I went to a big event maybe 2 weeks ago, and it was great. It was awesome, and I learned a lot just by going. But just the concept of life insurance, first of all, it's not called life insurance. I was like, everybody tells us it's life insurance. Yeah. No, it's called income security and income replacement. That's what it's actually called. So, and then I was learning so much, and don't get me wrong, these are white people teaching me this stuff, right? And I'm loving it. And they're like, well, people think, oh, let me get a $50,000 whole life, let me get a $50,000 universal life policy. And they spend this money, and they tell you about this cash value, and they tell you about this, and you could borrow from it, but they're not telling you that you're borrowing this cash value, which is their cash value, not yours, even though it accrues over time, it's theirs, because they pick the investment to make money, and you have to pay it back to them at an interest rate higher than the one you're earning. They don't tell you that. Right? Then, the other thing they don't tell you is whole life and universal life is 3 to 4 times more expensive than term life. Term life, you could get more coverage for less money. So, and then they explain to me the concept. You get life insurance, so guess what? Bill Gates he don't need it. Jeff Bezos don't need it. They're billionaires, right?
Billionaires, right.
But you get it because you don't have an estate that can take care of the dependents who need your financial money to live. You don't have that estate right now. So it creates an estate, an instant estate upon your death for the face value that you paid for. Now here's the problem. $50,000 could go in 2 years.
For $50,000, you go.
$50,000. So here's the thing. 5 years of income replacement. That's enough for somebody to get a college degree, to not have to worry about money, and take care of certain bills, rent, mortgage, whatever you want to call it for your significant other. Your children, certain amount of time. 5 years of money. $50,000 is not 5 years of money. But most insurance companies is going to sell you that insurance because they make a lot of money off of it. So the lessons that I was learning about insurance, income replacement, investing in mutual funds, and the interest rates with mutual funds is being higher than banks. Like, no black person sat down and ever had a conversation with me about it. Not to say they don't know about it, but just no black person ever had this conversation with me about it. And I was sitting there like, wait, the banks is paying me 0.05% interest on my checking account. But if I put my money in a mutual fund and I can draw my money out whenever I want, like a Roth IRA, I could draw my money out whatever I want. They only allowed to tell you about the highest is 9%. They have mutual funds that function at 33%. Rule of 72 is whatever the interest rate is, you divide 72 by that number, that's how long it's going to take your money to double. Nobody's ever told me that. No black people told me this. I'm sitting there like, oh, this is and what did they say? Compound interest. Leave your money in long term, compound interest. If your money will work for you if you leave it in there for 20, 25 years. You'll be a millionaire 20, 25 years. You could retire and just have to work at all. I'm sitting there like, yo, why are we not having these conversations? Because we're taught to work hard. And this is one of the main things that I want to say while I'm wrapping up. The fear of the truth coming out is an Olympic story. I'm going to tell you what I mean by an Olympic story. They ban teams for using steroids. Countries. The truth is, America got where it is by using steroids. They cheated. When you enslave somebody and take somebody else's property that you didn't have to pay for, you cheated. But they're telling us to be honest and not cheat. Mm-hmm. That's the problem that they don't want to come out of the bag. They cheated. So I'm going to wrap it. We're going to get back to this next time. But this is After Elemental.
This is Dominic, a.k.a. D. Chorus.
This is Moby, and this is Our View.
Peace.